Good morning, everybody. We have a couple of senators that are on their way and assembly members, so we're going to wait for just a couple of moments. Everybody's obviously an experienced hearing attendee. As soon as the staff sat down, everybody got quiet, but Superintendent, we'll start in a minute. They're right on the way. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. We are going to get started. There will be members coming down quickly, and other folks will drop in and drop out. You know the routine. But really appreciate the fact that both our senators are here, Carol Liu and Lonnie Hancock, good friends also, but well-known advocates in terms of education in general, and specifically we're going to be talking about the multiple pathways, paths for students for success. And just would like to briefly share just a few opening remarks and would give that opportunity to the senators as well. The issue of the multiple pathways to integrate academic and career technical education is an exciting prospect. We had a hearing, and Dr. Ainsworth was with us down at Renaissance High School in my district. It's a performing arts high school, and as we were having our hearing, out of the corner of my eye, I saw students on both sides of the stage crawling out around the corner of the dais. And that, of course, caught my attention a bit. And then they were all dressed in yellow, which, of course, then made me wonder, why are they all in yellow? And as it turned out, they were the bricks in the yellow brick road. And their presentation was The Wiz. And needless to say, with the different key performers that we all know, from Dorothy to the little dog to the Iron Man to the Straw Man and, of course, the Courageous Lion, they made their statement vis-a-vis song, dance, and performance. But the thing that was really interesting, of course, the performance was entertaining, but what's extremely interesting is with all the individuals in front of the camera, so to speak, they had all of these students behind the camera, setting up the stage, running the camera, directing what was going on, all the technical support. And I think it really epitomized that even with this great performing arts high school, that the performing arts is one part of it. But when you really look at potentially who's going to end up with a career in that field, and the performers were excellent. But we all know well the competition to get in front of the camera. But the opportunity to have a great career, well paid, a part of a major industry in California, behind the camera, and all that comes with it, was really compelling relative to what they were showing us in terms of the multiple pathways approach that school was a part of. So I think it really showed by example what can be done, and it also showed that with the partnership we have in the public sector and in the foundation sector, in good friends from the Irvine Corporation, good advocates and leaders from ConnectEd and other areas as well, all of this is being an effort that has really caught the imagination of a lot of parts of the education community far and wide, and I think it speaks to the potential resources and stakeholders that will come together to make this happen, along with the folks that do the primary work of teaching and the folks that help keep the schools open and the administrators that provide the leadership. So it was really a great example of what the multiple pathways can do. As people know, we had a bill with Speaker Karen Bass, Mina Carter, who will be down here in a moment, and myself about multiple pathways, and the manifestation was ultimately a report. And I know for a lot of us in this building, particularly those of you that have been around a considerable time in this building, might have yawned when you first heard, oh, another report that's going to go on the proverbial shelf and collect the legislative dust that tends to gather around this building. But I'm here to tell you that the report we got from the superintendent's office is not only compelling, it's exciting, and as Lonnie was whispering in my ear, it's like a roadmap that we could follow if we have any sense relative to this multiple pathways approach, linked learning approach, etc. But let me turn the microphone over to Senator Lonnie Hancock for comments.
Thank you, Assemblyman Furtani. We're going to have a great collaboration here. About experiential learning. And I feel that I came to it through a lot of experiential learning myself, which is why I'm so extremely committed to it. When I was in local government, I had the opportunity to work with the Bayer Chemical Corporation, and I don't know if they'll be testifying today at all or not, but work with them to set up a biotech academy in our public high school in Berkeley, and know from talking to the teachers and the students how that experience radically transformed for the better the experience of teaching and learning in Berkeley. And that model is now being used in about 21 high schools in the Bay Area. Since then, working with many of you that are here today on the School to Work Opportunities Act during the Clinton administration, which unfortunately did sunset in 2001. And again, there was a framework in the state. We had an advisory committee, and many, many districts stepped up and began to do wonderful things with their education. And I had the opportunity to participate in such things as the Law Academy that started at Mission High School and Balboa High School in San Francisco around careers, the wide range of careers in the law, not just the idea that you're training to be a lawyer, but learning the philosophy, the economics, and the experience of what it means to live in a country with a rule of law and to participate in some way. And leading up to legislation that the governor signed of mine 2 years ago to set up some green technology career academies in our public high schools. And I'm so pleased to have 3 of them that are happening in my district. I know there's many more across the state, because this is the way we know that we can grow what we all are hoping is going to be the new green economy in California. And we need our young people to know how to participate in every way, from inventing the next generation of energy-saving devices to installing them to marketing them around the world. Again, so very many careers. So this is the beginning, the first of what will probably be many hearings. I know that Assemblymember Torlakson will be holding a hearing next week on the state's leadership role in implementing the report. We're going to be talking with districts and talking about all of the recommendations that have been so carefully made in this very far-reaching report. And for all of us, I think the goal is to take the efforts that have already begun, take the roadmap in this report, and when we leave, to have a system that's left behind that will be serving our students for decades to come. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Lonnie. Senator Liu, please.
Just very briefly, I'm pleased to join both of you in this room full of familiar faces. All of us are very concerned about what is going on in our public education system. The idea of reinventing our high schools and addressing our huge problems here in the state of California is a daunting challenge, and the report has laid out kind of a 2-year pathway, but we're already past the first year. So we have lots of work to do, and I just look forward to listening to the presentations today and hoping that we can get this thing jump-started. Also in my district, I know Connect Ed has a relationship with one of my high schools in Pasadena, and I visited the program, and kids were really enthusiastic, committed, and not only learning, but and it's not learning by doing either. It's much more than that. Being engaged, staying with the curriculum, staying with the teachers they love, and it's all about that relationship that I think is so important as we look at our public school system. So with that, Assemblymember Furutani, look forward to hearing what folks have to say today.
Thank you very much, Carol. Perfect timing. Assemblymember Torlakson, you can, a few opening comments, and then we're going to start the hearing.
Just glad to be here and glad you're holding this hearing.
Thank you, Tom. Senator Hancock already shared that you're going to be having a hearing next week as well, talk about leadership. There's going to be several other hearings in the immediate future. Marty Block for higher ed in the Assembly, and Education Committee Chair Julia Brownlee is also going to be having a hearing on it. So those of you in the audience that are presenting today, get ready. There's going to be quite a lot of discussion on this. Also, just a reminder for public comment, if people want to sign up with Jill and with the sergeant about speaking, and we want to have public comment. But let's get right to the panel. And of course, we'd like to introduce to everybody someone that needs no introduction. How many times have you heard that, Mr. O'Connell? Our Superintendent of Public Instruction, Dr. Jack O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I enjoyed your story on Oz. I feel like I'm in Kansas here right now with some of that, but that was great. And, some of the comments, and thank you for holding this hearing. This is very important, and for all of your work and the committee's work in this area. There are times across the street where I take credit for some of your good work on this, so thank you. And really the comments pretty much, you just stumped what my prepared remarks are. But we have, in the area of career technical education on the broader scale, we've done a lot, and something I'm very proud of. 7 years ago, we had 288 career tech classes in the entire state that were A through G. We're now at 7,560. Which is something. The standards that we've done, we didn't have before, the frameworks. There was a group from the country Egypt that was in my office. The story's about 6 months old now, Assemblyman Torrickson's heard me tell it before, and they were just studying all our standards. And as they left, it was kind of a throwaway line. I said, which standards were you most impressed with? Was it English, math, science, history? They said your career technical education standards as well. The Career Partnership Academies, spent an afternoon with Senator Hancock at Berkeley High School when PG&E, one of 5 that they've adopted on the green energy, and you and the mayor were there, is my recollection, to be able to help kick that off, and 4 other similar partnership academies that we have in the state. And even during the very tough times, this legislature passed and the governor signed 2 years ago, adding the number of our career partnership academies. So we're close to 500 now in the state. What's the
Absolutely.
about?
We're at 500.
500. So that's a step in the right direction. So we have done a lot, and I'm pleased to be able to come by and just share a couple of ideas and thoughts with you, and really give you the very brief overview on the report that we did submit with your help. I mean, as I look around, all of you were helping us with as we unveiled the report last month that we submitted to you and to the governor. And the title of the report, I think, really says it best: Multiple Pathways to Student Success, Envisioning a New California High School. And what we attempted to do, and the report, we took a little bit of criticism for, our goal was to have the report done in a year. It took us about 18 months, but we wanted to put the thought into it that we thought was appropriate and try to roll it out. And really our goal was to try to explore the feasibility of expanding the number of multiple pathway programs to help us improve outcomes for the students, high school students in our state. I, too, want to thank Speaker Emeritus Karen Bass for her leadership role on this, as well as President Pro Tem of the Senate, Darrell Steinberg, who was also with us when we rolled this out. You mentioned Assembly Member Carter and the chairman. You've done a great job on this. Senator Hancock was with us as well. Senator Liu, Assemblymember Ang, and Portantino, as well as Assemblyman Torrickson. And the result was that we had the measure pass, AB 2648, and signed by the governor. It is the first in the nation to have a publication on the statewide expansion of the multiple pathways, or what some are now calling, I think most are now calling, linked learning for us in this state. California is also the first state to codify the definition of this new, exciting, promising approach to help improve student success in multiple pathways or linked learning. Question I frequently get asked: what exactly is the multiple pathways or linked learning, and what are the contents? And my response is, it's an integrated, multi-year high school program with rigorous academic core. In addition, it's a career-related technical core, a work-based learning component, and we also know we need to have the appropriate student support services. It really does include what we've been calling the 3 new R's in education: the rigor, relevance, and relationships. The rigor, because we want to have rigorous curriculum. The relevance, so that there's clearly applicability. And then also the relationships. And it could be relationships with higher education, relationships with industry, growing industries that we have. The report does call for innovation and bold solutions. And I really do believe it lives up to the title, Envisioning a New High School in the State of California. This report also provides a comprehensive analysis of research of our graduation rates, our dropout rates, the achievement gap, opportunity gaps that we have, and also post-secondary options that many of our students are taking advantage of. So we do have, I believe, an urgent need to pursue these recommendations and fully explore these recommendations. Let me set up some of the challenges that we have. Today in California, we have nearly 1 million individuals between the ages of 18 and 24 that are walking around our communities that do not have a high school diploma. Today, when you look at the numbers, and this is in the report in terms of our high school graduates, the numbers that graduate from high school, go to community college, 70% of these high school graduates take remedial coursework in math at our community college. And it's almost the same number, it's an alarm, for English language arts. 42% of our high school graduates that attend community college also have to take remedial work. And the perception from outside of education is also extremely problematic. A recent survey done by the business community stated that only 20% of the employer community in our state stated that they believed their new hires we're doing an excellent or good job, and we're prepared to do an excellent or good job as a result of our public school system. 20% said we were doing an excellent or good job in teaching basic comprehensive reading and English skills. And less than 10% of the employer community said we were doing an excellent or good job when it comes to analytical thinking of their new hires, their critical thinking, their problem-solving skills. Fewer than 10% were well prepared by our public school system. So the recommendations contained in this report come from hearings that we held, public hearings, from forums, from discussions with individuals, with groups and organizations, literally up and down the state. Now, I want to really kind of piggyback, if I may, Mr. Chairman, on your comments. I'm somewhat critical of the education community at times for too many reports. There are some well-done reports that have been placed on the shelf and collect that dust that you talked about, that the legislative dust, that the administrative dust. They become a book stop, a doorstop. For us, and we need to make sure this is not the case. There have been some excellent work done around this place on the getting down the facts, the Governor's own Commission on Educational Excellence, and this is a report that we cannot allow that same type of result to happen, candidly. I'd like to suggest we model this after our statewide P16 Council that came with 14 recommendations, and I can tell you today, all 14 within the next 5 months will be fully implemented. And it's been with the help of the legislature, help with the governor, help with the State Board of Education, and we have systematically gone through and identified each of those 14 reports. They're modest, they're not cure-all, they don't take a ton of money. I mean, and they were, I think, the way to go. So I hope this report does stimulate dialogue and is able to become implemented. We have to continue to work with the education community, involve the civic community, the leadership of our communities, business community, and obviously students and parents as well. I was disappointed as well, Mr. Chairman, at the two modest legislative vehicles that came to the legislature as a result of this report, and they did not pass the second committee when the Assembly Appropriations Committee regrettably failed to pass both of these bills. AB 2172 by Assemblymember Carter would have established a 16-member multiple pathways committee to help us promote this report, try to guide us in the direction that we can move forward, and be that vehicle for additional conversation and things that we need to do. And then the chairman's bill would have established 20 school districts up to 100 public high schools to enable them to have more flexibility to develop multiple pathways pilot programs. And I think we could have learned a great deal by identifying some of these school districts. So I hope that these provisions either can be resurrected in the close of this session or certainly next year. I believe that this can help us reduce the dropout rate, increase the graduation rate, address the achievement gap that we have, and better prepare our students for college and for their careers in their success. I'll close by just briefly mentioning a couple of the key provisions in the report. The Education Code states that we're suggesting that the purpose of high schools should be to prepare all of our students for post-secondary and career success. I believe this is going to be contained in the reauthorization of the Elementary Secondary Education Act that's going to be coming down from the federal government now. It appears that that's going to happen next year. But we need to move our high school system away from simply the seat time course completion system to a system whereby our students progress based upon mastery of identified and understanding of our standards. We also need to augment our accountability system and foster college and career readiness, which I believe will lead to increased graduation rates and reduce the number of dropouts in our state. And then finally, we also need to adhere, I believe, to the recommendations contained in their report regarding funding on adult education, something that is important for our communities, based on the number of adults without high school diplomas and who are non-English literate and who tend to come from low socioeconomic backgrounds. They tend to be unemployed and living in poverty. And to the districts that can meet and help provide education for these individuals, that's where the focus should be in terms of adult education funding. So I'm encouraged at the interest level. It shows quite a commitment from the members here on a late morning Thursday to hold this hearing, and I hope that we continue to spur additional dialogue in this area, which I think can lead to helping us reform in really a transformational manner our high schools. I want to thank also the many partners that we've had here. You're going to hear from some of them here today, and professional organizations. The LA Chamber has been extremely helpful and generous to us, as well as many other individuals. And you mentioned the James Irvine Foundation, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to echo those thoughts as well. And Dr. Patrick Ainsworth is here. He's one of the architects of the report. He's our Director of Secondary Career and Adult Learning Division. And we have our whole staff that worked on this report here to help respond to questions that you might have. So thank you very much for holding this hearing today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Superintendent. Thank you very much, Superintendent. And you had mentioned Dr. Ainsworth. He joined us at Renaissance High School.
Right.
But Dr. Ainsworth, we could turn it over to you. Oh, excuse me, 1 second before we do. Senator Huff, we gave people an opportunity to make short comments in the front end if you would like, or could do it anytime you would like to.
I'll make it very short. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ainsworth, please.
Well, thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here and to hear the enthusiasm you have for this report. Also here today is Fred Tempest from WestEd, and Fred was our partner in the development. WestEd was the partner in this, and Fred was the lead from WestEd on this report. We thought we might just take a moment for Fred to to describe their work and the background that behind this report.
Thanks, Pat. I'll be brief, but I wanted to give you some sense of how this report was developed. As Pat mentioned, I'm Fred Tempest. I'm a senior program director at WestEd, which is a nonprofit research development and service organization headquartered in Sacramento. We've been privileged to work on this and other reports with the department over the years. Just briefly, here's how we went about this task of conducting the feasibility study. Obviously, we reviewed relevant documents, and if you take a look at the bibliography in this report, there are hundreds of documents that we reviewed. We also conducted a set of framing interviews with key individuals in this field, many of them in the room here, to kind of get a good sense of what the issues and where we ought to focus our attention. There are existing efforts going on, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't duplicating those, so we talked to the ConnectEd folks and others and tried to learn what they were learning and included in the report. We established a website to communicate to a broad range of stakeholders who are interested in this question. We posted draft chapters of the report for comment, so I think we had ample opportunity for the field to chime in. We conducted site visits to 6 schools that are currently going forward with multiple pathways to learn about their experiences and some of the challenges that they face. We conducted what's called a web dialogue over 3 days, where we posed a series of questions and people chimed in electronically from around the state and around the nation as well. Over 200 individuals talking about student learning and the use of time and work-based learning, things like that. So we learned a lot from that. We also have our own experts at WestEd in various aspects of the issues that the legislature raised when they passed the bill. So I think we took a little bit longer, as the superintendent pointed out, than we had originally intended, but I think we have a very thorough, as some had referred to earlier, a roadmap for you to consider here as you move forward. The report itself has 15 chapters. We think when you take it as a whole, they address all the issues that were raised in the bill. So I think that is very complete. There are a set of recommendations at the end. There's also an executive summary. Now, I was going to say, when you look at those 15 chapters, I mean, it is a long document. There's a concluding paragraph or two at the end of it. This is the cheat sheet part. There's a concluding paragraph at the end there that I would read if I didn't have much time, because it really summarizes the issues very cogently for all of those. There's also an executive summary, which includes a little background about multiple pathways, now linked learning, some of the research results, and then summarizes the recommendations. The recommendations themselves are extensive and I think visionary, as the superintendent has said. And the nice thing, I think there's a separate chunk that was taken out as a 2-year agenda, so I call your attention to that as well. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Fred. This was quite an undertaking. While some people may yawn, we certainly weren't over in the department. we took this very seriously. This is a real opportunity. I'm going to look at the slides I've given you, and I'm going to start on page 3 and slide 5 because it's one of the key pieces of the legislation was to explore the feasibility of establishing and expanding multiple pathways in California. And the bill required us to examine 17 various dimensions of high school. So the report, some thought, could be just about multiple pathways as a concept or a program, but the bill envisioned the feasibility of doing this. When you talk about feasibility, you automatically have to talk about the context in which multiple pathways exist, and that is the modern high school in California. And so we looked at that very seriously across those 17 areas. And feasibility is important. It's about something that can be carried out or achieved. And the legislators and legislative staff involved in this early on made it clear to us, don't give us pablum. Give us actionable, directional recommendations, and we hope we've achieved that. You've heard about the goals of multiple pathways, and Superintendent O'Connell really laid out on slide 7 the 4 components of a multiple pathway program. Slide 8, you'll see some criteria, slides 8 and 9, that were used to formulate the recommendations. After all the research was compiled, after all of the work and public input, we looked at what would this report, what would the criteria be that we would judge all of the recommendations against. And so we came up with these criteria to really focus these and keep us on track. And the recommendations are measured against those criteria to keep these focused and actionable. And they came out in 10 areas. When we focused them, we really tried to stay true to the report. There are some items that aren't included in this report that we heard testimony on and received a lot of input on. And let me just give you an idea of some of the items that aren't in the report. We had a lot of testimony about the effect of sports on high schools, and the good and bad. This report felt like that was out of the scope of this report, but we've received, even after this report, lots of requests. Why didn't you talk about sports? Well, we didn't. Another area we didn't include was collective bargaining. It was, again, outside of the scope, but it's an important factor as you look at transforming high schools. Another area is about unification. There's quite a bit of evidence that unification, that we have many small school districts in this state, and that transitions from middle school to high school are a big issue in our state. And there were some that felt we should talk about unification and governance. Again, it was outside the scope of this report and really a distraction. And lastly, we did not suggest changing the A through G system in California. There is quite an extensive discussion about A through G in the report, but that's the constitutional authority of the UC system. What we concentrated on was what could we do to the high school system to improve it to the degree that it would actually drive university admissions for the first time. And that's a different approach. So we really believe we've gone in the right direction. Let me just say that there is one key concept that you'll see on page 11 that everything else emanates from, and that is in our current factory model high school that we've had since the 1800s, in a factory, time is a constant and learning is a variable. And this report says that we, in the modern age, the innovation economy, the knowledge-based economy, have to change that equation around so that learning becomes a constant and time becomes a variable. That is a fundamental change in the way we think about this. We have such a difficult time thinking about a high school that isn't organized in rows, in classes, and where students go period by period and semester to semester and year to year. And if you don't keep up, you get discarded off of the factory line. In fact, we can't afford to do that anymore in this state, and the report clearly lays that out, that we have to make learning a constant. We have to take students where they are and move them forward to graduation and transition to both post-secondary and career as they move from middle school through high school. So if I could point out on page 6, the fundamental change we're talking about is moving from a system that we currently have to a system of mastery. A system where progress through high school is based on demonstration of mastery of certain skills, abilities, mastery of identified standards. Some students might achieve mastery in 3 years. Some, it might take 5 years. But regardless, the focus has to be on the student and moving them through, having a personalized learning plan for every student, and then using whatever resources and techniques are needed. A system where courses could be thought of quite differently, where distance learning is embraced, where dual enrollment at community college becomes the norm rather than the exception. We would measure mastery locally just like we measure grades. That the state ought to identify some performance standards, but that mastery would be measured by those in the schools, our teachers, that are currently identifying mastery in terms of grades. And there might be benchmarks along the way, but it's certainly something that we could move to. We think that we ought to use the adult education funding that exists to and focus it to create a continuum of learning from age 16 on. And in the report, we actually describe we suggest restricting that funding to 4 areas rather than the 10 areas they currently have. Those 4 areas would be adult basic ed, adult secondary ed, career technical education, and ESL. Those are the 4 big areas that are most pointed at improving adults' economic future. And we would also revise the education code. As Superintendent O'Connell said, right now the education code separates career and university preparation. Seems to us that they should be equally important, and that all students should get to both ends if we're going to have an economically viable state. On page 13, if you move away from a time constant system, we believe you have to change the financing of this system. And the financing of this system we envision moving to an enrollment-based system. Rather than chasing every minute and every student and every class, that we would streamline the administration. That there are ways to do this. It gets into some complexity, but that would focus on getting schools the money. We would introduce a performance element into school finance. The performance element might be giving schools 80 or 90% of their funding up front, but withholding 10% or 20% phased in over time, and give it to schools when students pass a high school exit exam or graduate. We want to put an incentive in there to keep students in school rather than having them disappear off the school's report card to get a higher API, which seems to be counterproductive to us. So in better years, as the economy improves, we'd also like to see some incentives for districts that actually have operating dual enrollment systems and other things that we've identified in the report. And we also believe we're moving in the wrong direction in terms of school year. And I understand the challenges we all face, but we put a stake in the ground here and said, we can't continue backwards. We have to look at this. It ought to be a 10-year goal to extend the school year and match what other countries around the globe are doing, extending the school day and school year. On page 14, we think that if career education and career preparedness is important, then in fact it ought to be included and our accountability system. And if academic or if post-secondary and career readiness are important, that we ought to set targets and measure our progress towards those targets. On page 15, we talk about some of the curricular areas. I mentioned a rigorous program of study and personalized learning plan for every student. We think that the idea of that we currently have in our state of restricting people's use of technology ought to be turned around, that districts ought to be expected to use every technology possible. And we ought to free up, and through going to an enrollment-based system, stop worrying about that. And whatever it takes to get students to mastery, let's use that tool. And we would use, we know that in multiple pathway linked learning schools that interdisciplinary problem-based strategies and curricula turn students on, and that these provide a method for learning that really work. And if that's important, that we ought to put those into our curriculum frameworks for all subject matter. On slide 16, some of these are other sorts of ideas and proposals that we would incorporate. Of course, you heard about the advisory board, but we need to have professional development around this, and we need to have teacher education institutions supporting this, and that rigorous CTE has to exist within each year of high school. And then on slide 17, I jokingly say the least controversial part of this bill, of our report, is we boldly say that we need to rethink and reconceptualize career technical education. We have career technical education being delivered in a variety of methods, in a variety of ways. The report said we need to consolidate this into one system, and that we have a wonderful ROCP system in this state. And the report details what we would do to repurpose them to be the infrastructure of supporting career technical education, providing professional development and technical assistance, and some quality control at the local level. Many school districts no longer have career tech ed coordinators or directors, and frankly, if they're going to build pathways, we believe they should be the people that operate the career tech ed courses, and that the ROCP system could support that. We would also propose then running the career tech ed funding, including our Carl Perkins federal funding for the local money through them, as well as look at partnership academies and some other things to make sure that the money's getting down there and having the effect that it needs. We would also include a graduation requirement for career preparation. The public is really interested in this. They want to know that their student graduates able to do something, even if they're going to college. And they want to know that their student is not only career literate, but is literate in their personal career management skills, is financially literate, and is digitally literate. And those are all important factors as we look at a career preparation graduation requirement. Work-based learning is a core piece, and we have a whole section on that. And then we actually said that maybe if we have a universal one-stop system run through our local workforce investment boards, maybe we ought to do what Michigan did. If it's going to be truly universal, then you give every student in the state an opportunity to learn what that system is and understand how to use it as they transition into adulthood. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. This report is full of many, many interesting and provocative ideas. Our goal was to create a conversation, create direction in this state, and I think we've created quite a bit of conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ainsworth. Questions right at this juncture?
All the speakers.
No, we have one more, I believe. Is that, we're going to have Jim Solon. Okay, Jim, why don't we have you and then the questions?
Jim Solon, Legislative Analyst's Office. I'll just be very brief in my comments on the report. Just a few things to bear in mind as you go forward. First, I just want to compliment the department on a really wide-ranging and comprehensive plan. One of the other things I think is a real positive of it is that it recognizes some of the problems that we've also identified and that are, I think, pretty commonly recognized, such as what is the role of adult education in the broader system and what services should be provided to some students being served by adult ed. How can we better coordinate career technical education and possibly include it in some of our accountability requirements so that it's more streamlined in that way. A couple of things to bear in mind that might complicate implementing something like this is just that in some cases the recommendations are fairly prescriptive and moving in the direction of specific requirements rather than sort of away from that approach. As you know, the legislature's been moving more towards flexibility, and we think that this is an approach that can be used in career technical education too. We have a recommendation on a block grant for career technical ed where the funding would still be protected for CTE, but there would be more of a focus on back-end sort of outcome measures, giving sort of maximum flexibility for local education agencies to implement career tech, but still making sure you get some of the positive benefits of CTE. And just the last comment is that a lot of these ideas, just by virtue of being big and bold, would be very complicated to implement, I think. Something like the move from Carnegie units is a specific area that I think has a lot of intuitive appeal, but when you get into some of the specifics, it's quite an endeavor. So with those different factors to weigh in, that's what I'd leave you with.
Thank you very much, Mr. Solomon. Let's open it up, and should we have public comment first, or?
We'll do it after the question.
Yeah, okay, good. Whoever would like to, Carol?
I want to thank all of you for your comments. I guess the battle is just beginning, or it's, begun. I know, Mr. Ainsworth, we worked together in adult ed when I was in the assembly. I feel like it's deja vu for lots of these things. But, we're talking about, just as a personal example of when you talk about finance or relooking at what we're doing and putting students in front of what we need to do. We did something similar for community colleges this year in a bill that we tried to not pay for seat time. And boy, did we stir up a hornet's nest. But, it doesn't mean that we can't all rethink about what we are doing, and because we need to get there, given the limited resources that we have. And so that is a huge challenge. I want to know whether or not we could do this within the confines of existing resources. Well, what do you think?
Yeah, there are certainly some things we could do within the confines of existing resources, no doubt about it. That the actual implementation of a multiple pathways linked learning approach in the bill said there are some upfront costs to doing this. There are districts. LA Unified is working on implementing this in their district, and they're using a variety of resources, some grant funding and some foundation funding. The Link Learning, Connect Ed and Link Learning Network, Irvine's provided some funding. We do believe there are some startup costs to reforming around this pathways model. But in terms of the high school finance model, we spend a lot of money administering systems to keep track of every minute. And then we spend a lot of time penalizing people for that. The focus in this report is on student outcomes. Do what it takes to get the student outcome. And it doesn't necessarily take a resource-intensive solution to get there. It might be a solution. A student may come to high school with already having mastered something and can demonstrate that. Well, let's not sit them in a class then and make them repeat the same sort of thing again. Let's document that mastery and let's move on. So we believe there are some cost savings along with this. There will be some cost. So it does need further study in terms of some specifics. I will tell you that some of the business officials I've talked to have reacted rather positively to this, and I expected them to scalp me, but personally. But they actually have reacted very positively. They said this would bring us to a more stable budget situation, more predictable.
Following up on that a little bit, it seems to me this report is very far-reaching. It moves from simple, obvious things that we could be doing right away to something huge, like moving from Carnegie units to some other way of deciding that a student is ready to go to college. And I'm hoping that we can find a way to organize the recommendations so that the low-hanging fruit could be acted on in the next session or so. We could even hopefully have a package of bills that members of the committees could agree on and move forward on, and maybe vet with some of the stakeholder groups as well, so that we could get that done. I get a little worried that I see the high schools as being the core, how we really change teaching and learning in the high schools. Everybody always says the high schools are the last to change, the hardest to change, the most entrenched, the most diffuse, etc. So are you envisioning a real expansion of the Partnership Academy concept as being at the root of high school transformation? And then the question would be, how does the adult school, all the recommendations on adult school, how do they fit in? Do they come later? And then what about the ROCPs in terms of a closer alignment? We've already taken some steps to align them more closely with the high schools, but how do we act? It sounds like you're really saying that we integrate them into the high schools in a much more profound way.
We had envisioned using a multiple pathways advisory committee as a group that comes up with the plan, the strategic plan on which things to implement in sequence. We really envisioned them. This report gives you the what, plus it includes some recommendations we felt for immediate action. What are some of those things we felt we need to get on with right away? Now, it is true some of these items are bigger than others. We're looking, our conclusion was that we can continue to add parts to our old Nash Rambler and polish things up of the existing system. But in the end, you have a Nash Rambler that maybe still runs and runs fast, but it's like my son's 69 Camaro he just bought. Got in it, and I looked at it, and I said, boy, this is neat. But it's still got a lap belt, it spews toxic emissions, it's loud, and it's got wire heater controls. We looked at this and said, our high school system is not working for large numbers of students. As you heard, students going to the universities and community colleges needing remediation. You know that we have students dropping out. Somewhere 18, 20% of our students. And then the PPIC demonstrated this past year that we have large numbers of students that just are barely passing the high school exam. We said in this report, we need to take some steps to transform the system, not just redo what we have. And so some of the things are pretty big. And so one of the big things is rethinking our adult ed approach and having that continuum of learning and having them assist in the transition from high school to post-secondary, rather than being a place that those who failed go to. we want it to be a place that actually builds upon what happened in high school. And that's a different kind of an approach. The ROCP approach really looks at them. We suggest renaming them the Regional Career Preparation Authority, make some very specific recommendations about their role, but that each of the RCPAs would be composed of members of each of the school districts that participate in that. So they each have a horse in the game. So essentially, and resources are distributed equitably. And then the ROP would focus on giving, not only handing out the funds, making sure that certain quality measures, labor market, and performance are achieved annually, and providing that kind of technical expertise to build CTE courses to assist in the development of pathways. So that, yeah, there are some big ideas in here, and I know they are intimidating in terms of their scale. The Carnegie unit, it's hard to envision things differently, but it could be done, and we have very thoughtful people that are already doing this around this state.
Would this be a California first? Do we have any models? LAO?
I'm not aware of any particular models where this has been implemented in full by any means, or a state where they've shifted to this in full. I could be wrong. My knowledge on it isn't exhaustive, but so far nothing where it's been implemented to this extent. And I think one of the complicating factors is just how would you operationalize something like this? If you're talking about basing, moving ahead for a student on their mastery of a subject, then in some ways you're talking about, sort of assessing them at the end of each of these areas, and how do we go about doing that? We could leave it more to local measures, but by the same token, I think that's what grades were always supposed to be, is you master the material and you either pass and move on, or you don't, and you don't move on. And that system's obviously broken down. So if you really were thinking about moving to this in an extensive way, there are lots of issues that come up related to Casey that have to do with, students with disabilities, English learners, all of these things, and those issues would be magnified if you're trying to figure out how to progress all of your students based on some sort of mastery model.
I have one quick question, another one if I just could.
Senator, I'll speak.
Yeah. Do you envision, this is, and Mr. Tempest, this is kind of to all of you, this being legislature-driven or district-driven? And what are the particular incentives other than really the financial resources necessary to do this that we would give to districts if we're looking at it being a district-driven, voluntarily stepping up to the challenge kind of process?
Yeah, I think if you look at the recommendations, there's kind of a mix. There's some things that I think the department could undertake now with some external funding, either from the legislature or from foundations. I think there is an incentive on the part of school districts because they are embracing this approach now. So they need some of the regulatory flexibility and some of the encouragement that I think a modest state investment might make, in, for example, in terms of integrated curriculum. If you're reinventing integrated curriculum over and over and over again at the district level, it's pretty expensive. But there are major industry groups in California. I think some of that could be done at the state level. Developing quality criteria. What does a good multiple pathways / linked learning program look like? And some guidance from the department. So I think while we're waiting for the economy to improve, there's some things that we should do that when it does, we're ready, and not say now we need to start. So.
Thank you. Let me stipulate first, I happen to like Nash Ramblers. So something very comforting about being linked by wire. If it breaks, you know it broke, and you don't have to figure out where. It's somewhere in there. I'll also say that I'm probably the Neanderthal when it comes to linked learning. I like career tech, and I don't think we're reaching our students. I'm a little more reluctant when it comes to, and I've been vocal about this in the past, and it's mostly from ignorance, I will also say that, but I'm concerned that we lose many of those who would benefit from traditional career tech if we force them into a grid of multiple pathways or A to G or however you want to determine it. And so I will say it's more my ignorance, and I want to learn more about the model you're proposing. And so, when it comes to intellectual capacity, there's a well-defined bell curve, and we recognize that. It's probably less distinct when it comes to the modality, how you learn. I'm better at reading stuff. I don't listen and retain a whole lot that way, which is pretty sad as a legislator. Most of my information comes, through the airwaves. But I look forward to reading this and understanding that a little bit better. You said some pretty profound things. I like the way of taking away time, although you can't really take away time. But extending the school days and years, I think everybody would agree, if we could do that, would have significant benefits. Ironically, at a time we need to be doing that, we're cutting back and going the other direction. However, that seems to be mutually exclusive with doing so within our existing revenues, which is, I can't remember how it was qualified, but basically we could do it, or there's some qualifier. But obviously that's a challenge that we struggle with within our existing resources, because they're not unlimited. Even in good years, they're not unlimited. But to try to make what we're trying to do, trying to reach those that are not being reached in school, that are falling by the wayside, that are not motivated, that doesn't scratch them where they itch, whatever metaphor you want to use. But, this may be the way. I'm happy to open up my mind and let you convince me, but as I read this, I will keep that in mind and appreciate all the work you've put into it. I think we all want to see our students excel and be competitive, and to that, we're all challenging to find that right pathway. Thank you.
If I might, the report is very clear about career tech ed. It talks about 4 years of career technical education. Now, it's unequivocal on that. We know the data nationally are that students who complete a sequence of career technical education courses do better academically than students that are just in the general course. That's why the Perkins Act has the notion of a program of study that includes both a career technical sequence and accompanying academic courses that then transition to post-secondary. That's really one of the core concepts in here. That career tech ed could be like a pre-engineering program or a health careers program that prepares students for most of the job training is available in post-secondary. But it could be in a more traditional industrial arts kind of an area. And the fact is, we need to have programs because not all students want to go into pre-engineering. But we ought to have enough choices that students are able to move in the direction of their interests, I think. So I don't think there's any attempt in here to water career tech ed down. In fact, I think every attempt has been made to strengthen it.
Well, I think my concern is that in strengthening it, you lose that core group that is being served now. And maybe there's a way to achieve the same thing in the same course. You do this is your basic course, and to get the extra credit, you're learning the algebra involved in the engineering or whatever, But there's some ways. I just know some are not interested in it. They don't do well at math. They can figure it out intuitively, but they can't get it out of their brain and onto a sheet of paper. And there's many like that will never go to college. They have no desire to go to college, but they function at a very high capacity, and they're very valuable in our workforce. We can't leave them behind in our attempt to try to include more people, and I guess that's my biggest concern.
Thank you.
I think, Senator Huff, the issue of career tech ed and how to get to where we want to be with it is a central question, not only in terms of this report, but in general, and I think it's one of the great bipartisan issues we're all coming together on around this area. One thing that I really appreciate Senator Hancock's question about the package and looking at low-hanging fruit. The question of resources, et cetera, always will be one when we talk about extra days or more seat time because of reality. But if we look at what's going on a daily basis or weekend basis, we have a lot of communities that are stepping up and adding their own extra day. Senator Huff, when Senator was in the Assembly, one of the bills we worked on together was about your Saturday schools. And the Asian community in particular has Saturday schools. If you look at what's going on with Whitney High School and the ABC Unified, one of the top high schools in the country, they have academies, almost like Kaplan courses, to get ready to apply to go to Whitney High School. And it's community-based. It's not system-based. It's community-based. And the discussion around sports, not in terms of this report, I definitely feel is out of bounds. But the point, though, that I think we're looking at, that we have right in front of us, is really looking at funding a little bit differently in the future. I don't think the public dollar is going to do what we want it to do in the future. I think it's going to be hybrid funding, just like some of the multiple pathway stuff already is, where we're going to go to the philanthropic community, we're going to go to the business community, we're going to go to the labor unions when we talk about career tech ed and workforce development. We're going to go and have a lot of partners. And for example, sports. We know if you look at it in a holistic approach to education, it's very important, athletics, physical education. But I don't know how much Kobe Bryant made this last season, but we need to talk to Kobe and say, you know, the NBA is pulling high school students. You got to do 1 year in college or overseas before you can play in the pros. But it's like they're recruiting right out of our gyms. Why don't they help pay for it? You know, and we can put up an Adidas sign here, and I mean, we already do. But then entertainment as well. I mean, the students we have relative to their buying power and the industry relative to entertainment, they market, you know, right to our folks. And so why aren't they stepping up? So I think this issue of what we're talking about in terms of multiple pathways is a concrete example where different partners have stepped up. And I agree with you, Dr. Ainsworth, in terms of the Chamber of Commerce and our good friend David Rattray and others, superintendent, have really stepped up. But I think that's sort of something we have to integrate in the future. The public dollar is not going to be able to fund what I think our new systems are going to demand. And we need to get the right partner in the right place to step up to help shoulder some of this. And they'll get their benefit from it. They already do, but they'll even get more benefit from it. And then as we look at this, but I think the key thing is what Senator Hancock has said. If we could get some help looking at some of the low-hanging fruit, I really like the idea of a package. Because right now, oftentimes when something comes up and everybody gets excited about it, next session we'll have all of these bills, and the big question is, are they pieces of the same puzzle that if you fit them together, they make a picture? Oftentimes they're disparate connections to whatever, and they're out there, and you never get a picture. And I think that's true, and I really like the issue around the last page about the system when you talk about career tech ed. We have Bill AB 35, just went to Senate Ed, and through good help of my great staff, Eric, we presented a thing from the Budget Committee of all the funding sources for career tech ed. It was like a fourfold. It went this wide. And I said, this is who's doing it, but how many of them are working together? How many of them are cooperating, collaborating, maximizing? Because everybody needs resources in every area, but everybody's got their own administration in every area. Do we need all of that administration for all of these programs? Or can we partner? So I think systems, and I really like the approach on adult ed. Adult ed is hanging out there. They got put in the flexibility category. People are using adult ed money to keep the lights on. I understand that in terms of survival with us cutting 5 days of schools in a lot of our districts. But adult ed has a definite role, and I think we need to redefine it, and we need to realign it. You know, some places with K-12, other places with adult community college. We have to realign it. So I'm excited about this. I think there's a lot, and we could really use your help, Superintendent, for the next steps in terms of looking at a package, as the Senator said, so we can move forward. Paul Fung's got some great bills on community college. We need to make sure as we look at all of these ideas, they start coming together into a comprehensive whole, a system. And, you know, education is better than I do, or as well as I mean, everybody trots their Renaissance High School and these academic everybody does, and then you can write a master's thesis, a dissertation on it, and great, and look at how great. But the challenge always is the system. How does it become systemic change rather than individual change? So I think that's a challenge. Let's go to the public hearing part of it. And thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it very much. Rick Ida. Hi, Rick. How you doing? Come on up. Thank you. And also, if David Butler, I think, and Fred Jones, you can join us as well, and Nancy Vandell from the PTA. And if there's anybody else that wants to speak, please sign in with the sergeant. Rick, go ahead.
Thank you for allowing me to make a comment. I'm the Associate Vice President of Economic and Workforce Development at Sacramento City College. And seeing the multiple pathway report has stirred my interest as well as others in the community colleges. You were mentioning a few collaboration and partnership, and one of the things that we're fortunate to have at Sacramento City College is an SB 70 grant, and it's a community collaboration grant of which we have a partnership with 4 unified school districts in the Sacramento area: Elk Grove, Sacramento City Unified, Davis Joint Unified, and Washington Unified. We found that to be extremely positive because it's helped us to be able to learn more about the interests of the unified school districts that we have partnered with. Another thing is that we have done a strong push towards articulation, and I think someone mentioned about how we could develop a stronger union between K-12 and community colleges, and articulation of classes or courses has been very helpful so that students who are in the high school taking a course, if we articulate that course with a course at the community college, it helps to encourage students to want to go on with their education. Our goal with our SB 70 is to make it as seamless as possible, and we're starting at the middle school years. So we're going middle school, high school, and community colleges. One is to spur interest in the students. 2 is to help them to understand that they're going through career technical education. They have options. One is going from school to career, and another is to school to transfer. And that to allow them to understand that there's a direct link. So if they're interested, let's say, in air traffic control, by taking some core courses in the high school area and going to Sacramento City College and going through our new air traffic control program, then they could actually go and become an air traffic controller, or expand and go into and transfer to a university and go through the university's expanded air traffic control program. So we've noticed that the partnerships and collaborations are extremely beneficial to us, as well as articulation. The other something else too, and folks mentioned math and English. Yes, it's true. We do have a number of students who have difficulty in math and English. But what we've started to notice is that students that enroll in our career technical education program, because they start noticing that they need to be able to read and write as well as do math, that it encourages them to go farther, and also helps them to be successful in mathematics and in English. So although they may be disappointed in their high school years and maybe early in community college, by getting into a career technical education program and seeing the benefits of being able to read and write and to be able to do mathematics has helped them to succeed and move forward. And I think the final thing is that over the last few years, when we start looking at statistics community college-wide, what we've noticed is that 60% of all the students who receive a degree or certificate from the community college receive them in career technical education programs. So a multiple pathway approach can be extremely helpful to and beneficial to the students as well as K-12 and to the community colleges. Thank you.
That issue of contextual education and linked learning rather than the proverbial, why do I have to learn this? Well, if you want this job, you need this in order to, yeah, good. David. Welcome.
Member Furtani, members of the committee. My name is Dave Butler. I'm the CEO of an organization called LEAD, which stands for Linking Education and Economic Development. Mr. Assemblyman, for your benefit, LEAD is to the Sacramento Metro Chamber what Unite LA is to the LA Chamber of Commerce, and I am David Rattray's peer, but he's much more accomplished than I am in this field. Our board is comprised of roughly half employers representing a variety of industry segments and half educators. We have 5 K-12 superintendents, 2 community college chancellors, 2 county superintendents, and representatives from UC Davis, Sacramento State, and some of our private universities as well. Our job is to help align education to meet regional workforce needs. And as we were developing a strategic plan to guide our organization over the next couple of years, our education leaders suggested that the one singular thing that our organization could do that would serve the regional economy, serve our education partners, serve our employers, and serve our students was to help support school districts throughout our region in implementing rigorous career academies that are aligned with critical workforce needs. And so that's what we've been doing over the last several months. In February, we invited every K-12 high school district and county office in our region, there's 35 of them, to participate in a grant application to the U.S. Department of Education with their I-3 grants, investment in innovation. And we had 22 districts representing all 6 counties participate in this grant application with us. Our intention is to develop a region-wide system of support for school districts in our region to help support them implement rigorous career academies wherever they happen to be. And we want to develop and provide curriculum development opportunities, professional development, organizational coaching, technology, as well as assist them with civic and business engagement. The challenge, as you all know, is that education is incredibly siloed across the spectrum. They're not funded to cooperate. So our intention is to help break down those silos and help align that organizational structure, align that funding to achieve collective objectives. Our idea is, or our objective is to bring additional dollars, bring additional resources, and create efficiencies and economies of scale to help districts implement this work. And also, we really think that if we're successful in doing this, we can ensure that this isn't just an initiative that's siloed within education, but it's truly a civic initiative that all of us have a stake in the outcome. So we're going to continue to do this work, whether or not we receive this grant funding. We have the support of employers, have the support of our political leadership throughout our region, and so we really feel as though a regional approach, developing a regional system of support, is critical to this work. And on our organization and this work are highlighted in the Multiple Pathways report. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that and think about how the legislature and the department and others can help communities align around their regional economies to drive this work. Our employers don't want to engage school site by school site. They don't want to engage district by district. They don't want to be picking who they partner with. They want to engage by the cluster that helps advance their enlightened self-interest. And it also benefits the student. We've met with student after student after student who goes from a 1.1 GPA, I didn't even know you could have one, a 1.1 GPA to a 3.8, and they're off to pursue their objectives simply because the Academy was able to answer the question that you mentioned, why the heck am I here, and why do I need to know this, and how is it going to benefit me? And that's what this work does, and that's why we're committed to it, and we think that it's not only going to benefit students, but it's going to benefit our economy, because embedded within the system will be career education. They won't have to go through the gatekeeper, which is the counselor. They can see within their classes the full spectrum of career opportunities that are available to them, whether it's right out into the workplace, in an apprenticeship program, community college, or directly to university. I'll leave you this. One of our employers said, look, we all work together, whether we went right into the workforce or went into community college or an apprenticeship or university. We ought to develop a strategy so that our students, regardless of the pathway that they choose to pursue, are also working together. Thank you.
Okay, who's next? Mr.
I think
Jones?
I was. Thank you, Senator, and Assemblymember Fong, Senator Huff. Fred Jones on behalf of the California Business Education Association, which is also a founding member of the Get Real Coalition, which is labor groups, employer groups, educators, all working together in the interest of advancing bona fide, hands-on, industry-relevant career technical education programs in California, which I might underscore is at a historic low right now in California, and the trend lines continue unabated. Several of my teachers are part of partnership academies. So linked learning programs and partnership academies are about the closest model that are in existence today of linked learning programs. And obviously, because I represent teachers that are part of it, we are very supportive of that model. However, they are very expensive to maintain. They're expensive to put together, and they're tough to maintain because it does require buy-in by everybody at that campus: administrators, counselors, core academic teachers, CTE teachers. That's a tough thing to do given what teachers are prepared for and not prepared for in the pre-cert programs. So please understand that the multiple pathways vision is a transformational vision. It's a big picture. And with any big picture transformation comes big dollars. And so the low-hanging fruit analogy, Senator, that you brought up earlier, to me it's a troubling temptation, because if you don't do partnership academies well, they become counterproductive and fail. It's not something you can half-bake. I could use another expression, but I won't. The mic's on. And so when this process began, I was one of the first public testimony givers at the hearing over at CDE. My concern at the time was everybody acknowledges that career technical education is like a drowning victim. We can all see him out there in the bay drowning. And there's kind of two approaches. We can either just get in a boat, go out there and throw him a lifeline, or we can sit at the dock and build a luxury liner with all the bells and whistles to go save that victim. It's my teacher's opinion we cannot afford to wait. And so we hope that the effort to move along toward linked learning programs at every high school is not a means, an indirect means, of diverting resources to existing career tech programs and existing industry buy-in to those programs. For example, LAO has a recommendation to take the Ag Incentive Grant and the Partnership Academy grants and just dole them out equally among all districts. What about the industry partnership money that has to come in? Partnership academies are 1/3 funded by the state, 2/3 funded by the local district and industry. If we're just to take that 1/3 and dole it out equally among all districts, are industry partners going to continue giving their 1/3? And will districts be required to give their 1/3? No. So we have to be very careful what we do with finite career tech dollars. We're very concerned. Okay, so that was my concern when it started. Now I'm at a point, and my teachers, more importantly, are at a point where our concern is everyone acknowledges linked learning programs are going to cost a lot of money. This report says a minimum of $15 per student, but that's based on the PACE study, which analyzes Partnership Academy model, which is only 1/3 the cost. So it's conceivable that it would cost $4,500 per student to develop a multiple pathways program at every high school. Start doing the math, we're talking billions of dollars. So where do we get money? We can't find new resources. What we're concerned about, and this, if you don't hear anything else, hear this. Those of us in the CTE community are concerned that the money that will be used to develop linked learning programs will be federal Perkins vocational dollars, ROP, which is $383 million a year, Ag Incentive Grant, which is $5 million, Partnership Academies, which is $20 million. That is a concern to us because all of those dollars are tied to industry partnerships and local education agency buy-in. And if you start taking that money and just giving it to districts with no accountability, that's a problem. To my teachers out in the field and to the Get Real Coalition partners, which include employers and labor groups. So, the big picture. I believe you should always begin with the end in mind. The end in mind in public education is self-reliant citizens. How do we make self-reliant citizens out of our public education students? Education is a means to that end. It's not the end in itself. So this idea that either college or career, it's always about career because college graduates also need a career. Elementary school, here's the picture. Elementary school is about providing the core academic basis, the foundation for all students to know how to do the 3 R's, the old 3 R's. Middle school, as kids start going through their changes in life, you need to start entertaining them to keep their attention. So you need to start transitioning from the basics to more relevance. Give them exposure to what career options are out there. And then high school, if you do not connect a kid's life aspirations to their educational experience, you're going to lose half of them, at least. And guess what? We are. Because we're not connecting their life aspirations with their education. Kids that get into career tech do that, and they do better in college than kids that never had career tech. So it isn't about either or, but it is about the end, beginning with the end in mind. And we hope that whatever the legislature does with finite resources, you'll remember that career tech is one of those means to that end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Nancy Vandell.
Nancy, please.
Here's not scrolling here. Hi, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you so much for having this hearing today. My name is Nancy Vandell, and I'm a volunteer with the California State PTA on the California State PTA legislation team, and I'm representing one of the almost 1 million members of the California State PTA advocating on behalf of children and youth. We're very excited about the Multiple Pathways report. Transforming California's high schools through providing multiple pathways linked learning is needed to prepare students for the 21st century global economy. It's critical that our high school curricula and organization be updated for all to be able to support all learning styles and capabilities. We're very impressed with the visionary and comprehensive report. It addresses many areas that are priorities for California State PTA. This session, we've supported many bills addressing linked learning, work-based learning, career technical education, multiple pathways. And we're also disappointed that AB 2172 and AB 2445 regarding the multiple pathways report failed in the Assembly Appropriations Committee. We would hope that there could be something done to resurrect those activities before next year. We recognize that implementing the recommendations of the report is an enormous undertaking, but like Fred Jones, we need to provide the resources to at least examine implementing this report. It's important that we get a task force together to look at this implementation. And while I hear about the low-hanging fruit, and I think we need to be grabbing low-hanging fruit where we can, I think this is something that is going to save, I think, our state. It's that comprehensive and that transformational. And we have to get to a point where our kids are ready to graduate and go into some kind of higher education and careers that can compete with the countries that are producing graduates that are technically trained. So the emphasis on work-based learning, problem-based curriculum, teamwork, combined with rigorous and relevant academic curriculum is truly exciting. Why isn't this thing going down? I'm almost done. So next time I'll print. So we do, oh, there it goes. We strongly support having an advisory committee to implement the recommendations of the report. I will print next time I come to this. But we also ask that parents be included on the advisory committee, and that the California State PTA in particular be included on the advisory committee. We think the parents can bring a lot of perspective in terms of both being in the business community as well as a key part of their children's education, and would like to participate in that report. So thank you.
Hello.
Terry Burns on behalf of the Regional Occupational Centers and Programs. Thank you. There are 72 regional occupational centers and programs in the state of California. They have 3 very different governance structures: single district, county operated, or JPA, Joint Powers Authority, of different groups. They serve as the capstone course provider in any kind of a pathway. We talked before about high schools providing the basic courses, the theoretical courses, the initial courses. Once a student's been through a couple of those, then they attend a capstone course, typically at an ROP, which may provide them a certificate or may provide them the skills they need to move on then to the community college course. These programs are taught by folks who have experience in the field. They come from aerospace, they come from culinary arts, whatever the particular discipline is, and teach kids hands-on skills that they can relate to them as why you need this in the field. We very much appreciate having been involved in the preparation of these reports. The folks at the ROP Association are sitting down now looking at all of the recommendations to give you their responses to those. The 2 things that they are unanimous about so far are, first, that it does need to be done as that package you talked about, Mr. Fertani, pieces that all fit together nicely. The second is that we do need to strategically implement these things. Just because this piece is the easiest may not be the thing to implement first in that process. And so we're going to sit down and kind of think about how the recommendations that particularly revolve around ROPs should be structured in their implementation. Like the other speakers, we have to suggest that having the resources is key. Having an accountability and assessment system that judges school districts on how they perform these activities is critical to that. What they say is, what's tested is what's funded. A school district sits there and looks at what do we get scored on? What do we get measured on? And if we get measured on these three types of classes, guess what? That's where we're going to put our resources. That isn't what's happening with CTE right now. We need to be sure that that's in the mix. So we need to maintain the educators who have the life experiences to teach these classes. To simply bring in somebody who has a theoretical approach, it's not going to be effective. is proven to not be effective in delivering these services. Likewise, we need to maintain the industry advisory groups that ROPs have so that we have the folks in the local labor market telling school administrators what we need. These are the kind of outcomes we need. These are the kind of trained skills we need. We need to have that approach there. So that needs to continue in however you structure this. Timing is of the essence. In the current budget situation, you have seen a third of ROP programs going away. Either programs, the scope of programs, or the number of courses that are being offered at ROPs are gone in the coming year. I will suggest, I want to switch hats now to my other client, the Adult Education Associations, and say, wouldn't it be swell if we had only a third gone? We're looking at well over 60% gone in the coming year. It is critical that you do something soon to address the needs of those students, the 18 to 24-year-old person who doesn't have a high school diploma. To not make a choice is making a choice. It is critical that we decide as a state what we want to do with those folks. If we want to give them skills, how we want to deliver those skills, and which skills we want to prioritize for them. And right now you are quickly dismantling the only system that's out there for providing those services. So I encourage you to act promptly in that regard. Thank you.
Hannah Snyder?
No.
I'm sorry, Alexis Kelly.
Yes. Hi, is this on? Okay. Yes, my name is Alexis Kelly. I am just a recent graduate of Health Professions High School. That is it. Health Professions High School. It's multiple pathways type system. And this fall I'll be attending San Diego State Honors Program. And I just wanted to talk about a few things as a student, what I gained through the program. First off, with the classes, there are your regular normal A through G courses, but it offers an additional 4 years of sciences, so you get a total of 8 years of science throughout your 4 years in high school. And the community service opportunities through job shadows, internships, and fellowships at the healthcare field level. Health Professions offers the Diploma of Excellence type program, where if you participate in all the 8 sciences, the 4 years in math, 4 years in English, I believe 2 years of another foreign language, you receive an additional diploma as well as your normal high school diploma. And this year they recently just had a CPR certification for juniors, and these opportunities don't come just free-handedly. We work hard to get them, and you work hard to try to succeed in this school. And I just believe multiple pathways is a true representation of what students could do, especially in the healthcare field, through this school. And also do enrollment opportunities. I just had a friend that's a freshman who takes 2 college classes already at Sac City College, and as well as the constant reference to the healthcare field. So yes, we ask, what does this really do for us later on in the future? But we also have the constant saying, this applies to healthcare as well as just your daily life as you go on towards whatever career choice. And the opportunities are exponential. I'm a part right now, an intern for LA Unified and San Diego Unified representative, and Health Professions has given me that opportunity, and through multiple pathways. And one of the biggest things that Health Professions offers is the Integrated Unit Program, which is a school-wide project for 9th, 10th, 11th grade, and there's 2 projects per year, and then your senior project at 12th grade. And these projects, you have to go out in the community. So you might have to do a presentation with different medical associations or UC Davis. You might have to work with whatever subjects, with teens. You might have to work with elderly. You have to work with young children through these projects. And so the multiple pathway system, for me, is a testimony of the opportunities that I gained from this school, because I did go to a bigger high school that was just a normal A through G, nothing Pacific. And I feel that Health Professions has made me have a voice, and I'm forever thankful for that. And so I'm really glad that I went out of my normal district of Elk Grove Unified to Sacramento City Unified School District just so I could be a part of this Multiple Pathways program. And I will never forget it. And my only thing is that now with the budget, we're down, since our school is so small, 400 to 500 students, we might have no counselors next year. We only have once a week librarian. We have no school nurse. So the budget is affecting our school, but I believe that the school prepares students to speak up. So as we continue to speak up, even with our lack of counselors and resources, we continue to have that voice to keep asking for help through partnerships and other organizations. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Hannah Snyder.
Hi. I just had a quick question. It's kind of a two-part question. And the first is how are or how should these students be placed in their pathways? So I know that, could it be by choice? Is it all the student choice? Or what if they choose a pathway that just is totally unsuited for them? Is it also based on aptitude tests or aptitude in general? And the second part of the question is, what if a student is unhappy in a pathway that they're in? I understand reading about what the pathways are here, and that it sounds like there is some leeway or it's transferable if they choose a different career in the future. But what if they see something else and they're like, that's where I want to be? I know that high school is very much a time of, self-discovery, and it's very much of a time of trying a bunch of different new things, and I worry about rigidly putting a student in one pathway or the other and not having this sort of transferability as they go through the years. Thoughts on that?
That is a very reasonable fear. And I think that we've discussed this quite at some length, because one of the things our school system in the United States has been about is equity of opportunity. The rest of the world doesn't quite provide the opportunity we have, and we want to have people that have the ability to make choices. It's true that young people will probably end up in a career that they may not even know about now. But I never expected to end up where I am today when I was in high school. But the experiences I had really helped. What we found with our partnership academies is when you give students the opportunity to go deep into a subject, they gain both depth and breadth, and many transferable skills. Many of the schools, the thematic schools and the academy schools, have mechanisms that allow students to move between them. I think those are necessary. There have to be those safety valves, because students' interests do change. But we see the benefit of that, of going deep and getting to mastery.
Good.
So.
Good answer. Thanks.
Thank you.
And I think, and I don't know if it was conscious or, you notice the word is not tracking.
Yeah.
Right.
You're put on a track, like a railroad track, that you
right.
only the way you'll get off is you get derailed. I think that's why they're calling it pathway. And I think also, no matter
that's a good point.
when you get into the mastery depth part of it, the original part of the pathway is going to be pretty broad, because what you need to learn as a basic education for any of these fields is going to be pretty much
so if they
common.
could start with a broad and then maybe have the ability to move about after the third year or something.
Absolutely. Many of the students that...
Sort of like college.
That's right.
Where you enter undeclared and then, get the education and then go,
Well, we found in our health careers pathways and academies, oftentimes students get in there thinking that's what they want to go, and then they found out they don't like to be around sick people and blood.
There you go.
So learning what you don't like is also part of this discovery process, and we're on the same page with you. Those are good questions.
Thank you. Mr. Fong? Oh, okay. Everybody, let me just acknowledge someone. This person, I thought for the longest time he worked in the building, but he doesn't. But he's been such a great advocate and resource for this multiple pathways initiative. I just wanted to make sure, and I should have done it earlier, Jose, when more people were here, but I wanted to acknowledge Jose Hernandez for all of his work on this issue and all of his assistance and leadership. Thank you very much, brother. Thank you very much, Senator. Thank you so much, and much more work to do. Senator Fong, thank you very much for coming. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.